Big topic today. We're going to talk about religion. This is chapter 21, and before we get started discussing this subject matter, I'd like to preface it with an understanding of what perspective I would like you to take when we get into this subject matter. And really important before we even get started is I'd like you to put on your anthropologist's hat, and I would like you to think from the perspective of cultural relativism. I want you to have the very ethic mindset that you are trying to be a social scientist examining human behavior. So many people, maybe yourself included, have their own religions, and these can bring up very deep emotional responses. And I'm not trying to teach a class here on theology or even on specific religions themselves. Anthropologists try to study the concept of religion as a nearly universal human pattern of behaviors, one that can involve spirituality or not. Religion is something that defines sort of a category of identity. We've been looking at several different kinds of identities. We've looked at political identities, we've looked at gender identities, we look at ethnic identities, and religion is one of those things as well. But as a type of identity, religion shares a lot of things in common with secular identity groups as well, which we'll come into a little bit as well, a little bit later on. So I want you to think much larger than religion, than just being some of the big three, like, for instance, like the Judeo-Christian religions or Eastern religions. The big ones we will talk about, but this is a part of the human experience that is much larger than just the big religions, the big monotheistic religions which dominate today. It also, this discussion will include the type of behaviors for people that don't believe in any deities or any sort of religious doctrines. So the word religion and religious is difficult to define, because what we're talking about here is something that is, in the 60s, was defined by Wallace as belief and ritual concerned with supernatural beings, powers, and forces. But I'd like to take a little bit of a broader definition, and one that Rees defined in 1999 is that religion focuses on bodies of people who gather together regularly to worship, emphasizing collective, shared, and enacted practices of religion. But also, someone we've encountered before, one of the founding fathers of social theory, or one of the founding people that was involved in sociology, Emil Durkheim, stressed the concept of effervescence, the bubbling up of a collective emotional intensity generated by this group behavior, a community spirit that creates social solidarity, sometimes equality and togetherness, but it also creates a group of people that are insiders and a group of people that are outsiders. So it, like many other forms of identity, is a way to participate in group behavior. So anthropologists tend to examine religion as a social phenomenon, not from a theological perspective. And we try to look at the meanings of religious behaviors, religious doctrines, acts, those sorts of things in the context and the backdrop of the culture that you're studying. So once again, functionalism is a good way to look at this. So going back to chapter 13 and your ideas of theory, how do you deal with something like marriage that we dealt with in a previous chapter? Well, it's really hard to extract that from the concept of religion. If you have a religious mindset, that will channel you towards certain types of marriage practices, or kinship practices, or identity practices, or ethnicity even. Some ethnicities are even defined by the religion itself. So religious beliefs also can be